We've got Sophie Cunningham getting her own shoe, and everybody losing their pathetic little minds over it. Well, not everybody. Old WNBA fans, old guard WNBA fans, are losing their mind over the white girl pointing at her brand new shoes. Yeah, that's what she's pointing at.
You ever see the internet completely melt down over a basketball shoe? Because that's exactly what happened when Adidas linked up with Sophie Cunningham for a brand new release. The moment her player-exclusive colorway was revealed, the reaction wasn't just loud, it was absolute chaos. Some fans celebrated, some were ready to buy immediately, and a very vocal group completely lost it. Suddenly, timelines were flooded, arguments were everywhere.
Old fans crash out, lose their mind, and scream white privilege. It is hilarious watching these people melt down over the most minuscule things, over the smallest little things. Watching these folks melt down, go hysterical, lose their mind, rant, rave, complain. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
And people were treating this shoe drop like it was some kind of personal attack. But here's the real question. Why does Sophie Cunningham getting a shoe make so many people this angry? That's where this story gets interesting. Because this isn't only about sneakers, design, or even basketball. It's about popularity, attention, branding, and the kind of spotlight that makes people uncomfortable when it lands on the wrong person. Sophie Cunningham has become one of the most talked about names in the WNBA, and whether people like it or not, Adidas clearly sees the value.
Sophie Cunningham, the blonde bomber, is coming out with shoes. These are so dope. These are her PE colorways coming out with Adidas. Oh my God, Sophie Cunningham, man, just keeps getting better and better by the day, man. I hope these are for men as well, man, because I would like to cop these, man. These are hella dope. Very Sophie type of shoes, man. Like, I don't know. I just look at these and I just see Sophie just all over them, man. These are perfect.
So in this video, we're breaking down the shoe, the backlash, the business behind it, and why all this outrage may be doing one thing more than anything else, making Sophie Cunningham even bigger. What makes this whole thing even crazier is that the outrage didn't start because the shoe looked bad. It didn't start because nobody knew who Sophie Cunningham was. And it definitely didn't start because Adidas made some random decision with no logic behind it. The backlash exploded because a lot of people saw Sophie Cunningham get something visible, something marketable, something that felt big, and they immediately decided she didn't deserve it. That tells you right away this was never just about a shoe. This was about attention. It was about status. It was about who gets celebrated, who gets marketed, and who certain people believe should stay in the background. Because let's be honest, Sophie Cunningham has not been living in the background lately. For years, she was known as a solid player. Tough, physical, reliable, willing to do the dirty work, willing to take the heat, willing to stand up for teammates, willing to hit big shots when the moment called for it. She had value long before social media started obsessing over her. But in the last year, her profile changed dramatically. She went from being respected by basketball people to becoming one of the most talked about names in the league. And when that happens, brands notice. They always notice. That's the part some people either don't understand or refuse to accept. Adidas is not running a charity. Adidas is not handing out shoes based on who has the cleanest stat sheet or who makes the internet happiest. Adidas is a business. It looks at visibility, personality, momentum, fan engagement, storylines, marketability, and whether a player connects with a real audience. That's what brands pay for. And right now, whether people like it or not, Sophie Cunningham brings attention. A lot of it. The people raging online keep trying to reduce her entire value down to one number. They throw out points per game like that's supposed to end the discussion.
8 points a game. Career numbers. Role player. Rotation piece.
As if that settles everything. But if shoe deals were handed out purely by stat lines, sports marketing would look completely different than it does today. That's not how this works.
Never has been.
Brands have always cared about image, identity, and impact. Sometimes impact shows up in the box score. Sometimes it shows up in the culture. Sometimes it shows up in the way a player can command attention without even touching the ball. Sophie Cunningham has figured out how to do that, and people hate that she did. And a huge reason they hate it is because Sophie Cunningham has become symbolic of something bigger in this current WNBA conversation. She's not just a player anymore. She's part of a cultural flashpoint. Every time her name trends, People don't just talk basketball. They talk about fandom, race, media attention, league politics, favoritism, social media behavior, branding, and who is allowed to become famous in women's sports.
That's a huge spotlight.
Most players never even get near that kind of spotlight. Sophie Cunningham is in it now, whether people approve or not. A lot of that momentum got supercharged by that now famous moment everybody remembers.
The pointing clip. The one that spread everywhere.
The one that turned into memes, edits, reactions, debates, arguments, and think pieces. The one people could not stop replaying. That moment changed how the broader sports world saw her. Suddenly, she wasn't just a WNBA player known mostly by dedicated league fans. She became recognizable to casual fans, sports media pages, meme accounts, debate channels, and people who don't even watch full games. That kind of crossover attention is rare. It's incredibly valuable. And it created exactly the kind of identity a brand can build around. That's why this shoe release makes perfect sense if you take emotion out of it and just look at the bigger picture. Sophie Cunningham already had the personality. She already had the edge. She already had the confidence. She already had a style people could recognize. Then she got a viral moment that made her even bigger. Then the conversation around her got louder. Then the audience around her got wider. So now Adidas comes in with a player-exclusive colorway and people act shocked? Why would they be shocked? From a business standpoint, this is one of the most obvious moves they could make. And on top of that, the shoe itself actually fits her brand. That matters too. This is not one of those situations where a company just slaps a name on a generic product and hopes nobody notices. The design feels loud. It feels expressive. It feels bold. It feels like it wants attention, which is exactly why it matches Sophie Cunningham so well. It doesn't look shy. It doesn't look safe. It doesn't look forgettable. It has personality.
That's the whole point.
Whether somebody personally likes the color palette or not is irrelevant. It looks like a shoe that was made for a player with a presence. And Sophie Cunningham absolutely has a presence. But what really sent people over the edge was what the shoe represented. Because to the critics, this looked like proof that popularity is winning over deserving. That's the word that kept showing up over and over again. Deserving. She doesn't deserve it. Other players deserve it more. More talented players deserve it more. Bigger stars deserve it more. Better stats deserve it more. And maybe some of those arguments sound reasonable on the surface. Of course there are elite players with stronger basketball resumes. Of course there are stars with bigger production. Nobody is denying that. But that still doesn't mean Adidas made the wrong move. Those are two totally different conversations. One conversation is about basketball hierarchy. The other is about brand value. People keep trying to force those two things into one category when they're not the same thing. Being one of the best players in the league does not automatically mean you are the best marketing vehicle. Being statistically dominant does not automatically mean you move product better than someone with a stronger personality and broader internet appeal. Sports history is full of examples where visibility and connection mattered just as much as production. That may frustrate people, but frustration doesn't change reality. And here's where the conversation gets even more uncomfortable for the people losing their minds. Some of the criticism is clearly about basketball.
Fine. That's fair game.
Fans argue about who should get what all the time. But some of this backlash is obviously about more than that. You can hear it in the tone. You can see it in the obsession. You can feel that this is personal for certain people. Sophie Cunningham irritates them in a way that goes beyond sneakers. She represents a version of attention they deeply resent. And when they see a brand reward that attention, it drives them crazy. That's why the reaction felt so intense. Because this wasn't a normal sneaker debate. This was people projecting all of their existing frustrations onto one announcement. Their issue wasn't just that Sophie Cunningham got a shoe. Their issue was that Sophie Cunningham keeps getting bigger. She keeps staying in the conversation. She keeps pulling attention. She keeps becoming harder to ignore. And every time something new happens, whether it's a viral clip, a hot quote, a strong performance, or now a shoe drop, it reinforces the same truth. She matters in the current sports media landscape. The funniest part is that outrage like this often helps the very person it's trying to tear down. Every angry post, every mocking comment, every quote tweet, every dramatic rant keeps the story alive. It pushes the product further. It makes more people curious. It introduces the shoe to audiences who might not have even seen it otherwise. That's how internet culture works now. Controversy is fuel. Attention is currency. And Sophie Cunningham, intentionally or not, keeps ending up in moments that generate both. So while critics are busy trying to argue that this release is some kind of disgrace, Adidas is probably looking at the engagement and smiling. Because the brand understands something the loudest haters don't. People do not need universal approval to sell a product. They need awareness. They need identity. They need conversation. They need a buyer to feel like the product means something. This shoe already has a story. It already has controversy. It already has a face attached to it. It already has people talking. That alone gives it a better launch runway than most drops ever get. And Sophie Cunningham, for better or worse depending on who you ask, is exactly the kind of athlete who can carry that.
She's not bland.
She's not invisible. She's not trying to disappear into the background and make everybody comfortable. She plays with emotion, talks with confidence, and seems completely fine being disliked by people who were never going to support her anyway. That kind of unapologetic energy is magnetic in modern sports culture.
Some people love it.
Some people can't stand it. But almost nobody ignores it. And that may be the real reason this whole shoe drop hit such a nerve. Not because the move made no sense, but because it made too much sense. It confirmed that Sophie Cunningham is no longer just a role player people casually mention during a game.
She is a brand story now. She is a conversation starter now.
She is a marketing asset now. And the people who wanted her to stay in a smaller lane are being forced to watch that lane get wider in real time. And this is the part people really do not want to admit, because once you admit it, the entire argument starts to fall apart. Sophie Cunningham does not need to be the highest scoring player in the WNBA for Adidas to see value in her. She does not need to average 25 a night. She does not need to be the league MVP. She does not need to check every traditional box that old school fans are used to using when they decide who is worthy of a major brand push. What she needs is attention, relevance, recognizability, and a clear identity that people instantly connect with. Right now, she has all of that. That is what makes this reaction so fascinating. People are arguing against modern sports marketing like it still works the way it did 20 years ago.
It doesn't.
We are not living in a world where brand decisions are made only by scanning a stat page and handing endorsements to the cleanest numbers. We are living in a world where personality travels, clips travel, controversy travels, and fan loyalty turns into real money faster than ever before. A player who creates conversation is a player with value. A player who gets people talking outside the core basketball audience is a player with value. A player who can make people emotional enough to argue for 3 straight days over a sneaker drop is absolutely a player with value. And that is exactly why Sophie Cunningham makes sense. Because when people see this announcement and immediately say, there are better players, they are not really disproving anything. They are proving they still think the conversation is only about who is better on the court. Adidas is asking a different question. Adidas is asking who can move attention. Who can carry a look. Who can create a story around a product. Who can make fans feel like buying this shoe says something. Who has a visible identity that the average sports fan can remember after seeing one clip, one interview, or one photo. Sophie Cunningham checks those boxes in a way that a lot of statistically superior players simply do not. That may sound harsh, but it is true. There are players who are better hoopers than Sophie Cunningham and still do not have her level of current online recognition. There are players with stronger resumes who do not trend the same way. There are players with more complete games who do not spark debate every time their name comes up. That is not a moral judgment. That is not saying those players are less important. That is just acknowledging the marketplace for what it is. Being excellent at basketball and being highly marketable are related, but they are not identical. Sometimes they overlap perfectly. Sometimes they don't. And let's talk about timing, because timing is everything in sports culture. If this same exact shoe announcement had happened a few years earlier, maybe the reaction would have been different. Maybe it would have landed softer. Maybe fewer people would have cared.
But now?
After months of non-stop discourse around the WNBA, after fan bases have become more tribal, more online, more emotionally invested in every headline, after every piece of attention around certain players turns into a larger argument about the state of the league, now, a move like this doesn't just register as a sneaker release. It registers as a statement. That is why the backlash sounds so personal. It is not just, I don't like the shoe. It is, I don't like what this shoe means. And what it means, at least to a lot of people, is that Sophie Cunningham has crossed into a different level of visibility. She is no longer just part of the conversation. She is becoming a symbol inside the conversation. When a brand like Adidas puts something out with her name attached, it tells the public that they believe she is worth building around.
That she is worth highlighting.
That she is worth putting on shelves and in headlines. For people who hate the attention she gets, that feels like a direct challenge to the order they prefer. And honestly, that may be why this whole thing became bigger than the shoe itself. Because the product is almost secondary once people start attaching all their own baggage to it. The actual design, the price, the release date, those are the easy talking points. But underneath that, what people are really arguing about is influence. They are arguing about fame. They are arguing about who has become culturally bigger than they think that person should be. And once a fan starts arguing with reality instead of reacting to reality, that is when the takes get ridiculous. You saw it all over the place. People acting like Adidas had committed some crime against basketball tradition. People talking as if a player-exclusive release was supposed to be some sacred honor reserved only for the absolute elite. People posting like this one drop somehow erased the accomplishments of other stars. But none of that makes sense. Brands do not make these moves to satisfy message boards. They make them because they believe there is a market. And if we are being real, a loud reaction like this only confirms there is one. Think about what has already happened. Before a lot of casual fans even know the technical details of the shoe, they already know the story. They know Sophie Cunningham is attached to it. They know some people love it.
They know some people hate it.
They know it is part of a larger cultural conversation around the WNBA. That alone gives this drop a built-in identity. Most products never get that. Most products have to fight just to be noticed. This one was noticed instantly. And it is not hard to see why Adidas would bet on that. Brands love products with built-in narrative. They love athletes with a recognizable point of view. They love personalities that feel easy to market visually and emotionally. Sophie Cunningham offers all of that. She has a strong on-court persona. She has moments people remember. She has a certain swagger that translates. She carries herself like someone who knows exactly how she is perceived and does not care if everyone approves. That confidence is part of the appeal. It makes the product feel attached to something real instead of something manufactured. That matters more than critics want to admit. Because the easiest mistake people make is assuming that if they are annoyed, then the strategy must be wrong. But sometimes the annoyance is the proof that the strategy worked. Not always, but often. If the goal is to create noise, create separation, and create emotional engagement around a release, then this drop already succeeded before the first pair even hit the street. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a take. Everyone suddenly wants to debate marketing philosophy, fan culture, merit, popularity, and brand logic. That is not failure. That is oxygen. And here is the funniest contradiction in all of this. The same people who claim Sophie Cunningham is not a big enough deal to get a shoe are spending enormous energy proving she is a very big deal to them. If she were truly irrelevant, they would scroll past the announcement and keep moving. They would not be writing essays in the comments. They would not be making videos.
They would not be quote tweeting.
They would not be trying to organize the internet into a jury over whether this release should exist. Indifference is what irrelevance looks like. Obsession is what impact looks like. And Sophie Cunningham is getting obsession. That is why the undeserving argument feels so weak once you really inspect it. Deserving according to who? According to which rulebook?
According to which era?
According to fans who still want sports marketing to behave as if the internet does not exist? According to people who think cultural impact should count for nothing if the stat line is not shiny enough? That is not how the real world works. Not in 2026. Not in professional sports.
Not in sneaker culture.
Not in a media environment where one moment, one gesture, one rivalry clip, one personality trait can blow a player's public profile into a whole new tier. And Sophie Cunningham has entered that tier. She may not be the biggest star in the league overall. She may not be the most accomplished player of her generation. She may not have the best basketball resume among the names being compared to her. But that is not the point. The point is that she has momentum.
She has a lane.
She has a public identity people react to immediately. She has a fan base that wants to support her and a group of critics who cannot stop amplifying her. From a branding perspective, that combination is powerful. Maybe even ideal. So while some fans are still treating this release like an injustice, Adidas is likely looking at the situation much more simply. They see a recognizable player. They see a distinctive story. They see controversy that keeps the product circulating. They see a design that stands out. They see a price point that feels reachable for fans. They see a drop connected to a name that currently generates way more attention than a traditional stat-based evaluation would predict. That is not a mistake. That is a strategy. And the biggest reason people are struggling with it is because they know deep down that this is probably not the last time they are going to see Sophie Cunningham elevated in a major way. That is what really bothers them. The shoe is one thing. What the shoe signals is something else entirely. It signals that brands are paying attention. It signals that visibility matters. It signals that marketability matters. It signals that Sophie Cunningham is no longer being treated like a background player in the public imagination. She is becoming a headline, a talking point, and a business opportunity all at once. At the end of the day, the only question that really matters is the one everybody is pretending not to ask. Is this shoe actually going to sell? Because that is where all of this fake outrage runs into the wall of reality. You can dislike Sophie Cunningham. You can say another player should have gotten the spotlight. You can complain about marketing, argue about stats, and act like Adidas made some outrageous decision. But once launch day hits, none of those speeches matter nearly as much as one thing. Are people willing to spend money on the product? And the answer looks a whole lot more favorable for Sophie Cunningham than her critics want to admit. Because here is what they are missing. This is not a random player with no audience, no identity, and no buzz trying to move an overpriced shoe. This is a player whose name already sparks instant reactions. This is a player tied to one of the most talked about stretches in recent WNBA culture. This is a player connected to a fan ecosystem that has already shown it will buy tickets, merch, and anything attached to personalities they feel invested in. People can roll their eyes at that all they want, but consumer behavior does not care about bitterness. Consumer behavior follows emotion, loyalty, visibility, and story. Sophie Cunningham has all four working in her favor right now. And that is why so many of the loudest critics are actually nervous, even if they would never admit it out loud. Because if this shoe performs well, then the whole argument they have been making starts looking shaky. If the release moves product, then all the talk about Sophie Cunningham being undeserving becomes a lot harder to defend. If fans show up and buy it, then Adidas gets validated. If Adidas gets validated, then it sends a bigger message across the sports world that marketability can come from personality, momentum, and cultural relevance just as much as it can come from elite numbers. And a lot of people do not want that message reinforced because they already feel like too much attention is going to the wrong people. That is why some of these reactions feel less like analysis and more like pre-damage control. They are trying to set the narrative early. They want to frame the release as a joke before the numbers speak. They want to laugh at the price before anyone checks out. They want to call it a bad move before the market gets a chance to prove otherwise. Because if it works, then they lose more than just an argument about a sneaker. They lose the comfort of believing that the internet, fan culture, and brand strategies still operate by their preferred rules. And there is another reason this shoe has a better chance than people think. The product itself is not relying only on basketball purists. That is a huge part of the equation. A shoe like this can travel beyond the core WNBA audience if it looks good enough, feels current enough, and has enough social energy around it. Not everybody who buys athlete-branded sneakers is sitting at home studying advanced metrics. A lot of people buy because the shoe pops. Because it feels bold. Because it matches a personality they like. Because it became part of a moment. Because they saw it all over their timeline. Because they want to be part of the conversation instead of just watching it happen. That is where Sophie Cunningham's critics keep making the same mistake. They assume the buying audience thinks exactly like they do. They assume everybody approaches this the way an angry online commenter does. But most buyers are not joining debates about basketball purity. Most buyers are reacting to vibe, design, narrative, and visibility. They are seeing a colorful Adidas basketball shoe with a recognizable athlete attached to it and deciding whether it feels worth the money. That is a very different process from the one happening in a comment section full of people trying to settle personal grudges through marketing discourse. And let's be honest about something else. The price point is not some impossible barrier. For a modern branded performance basketball shoe, $120 is not a crazy number. In fact, compared to what a lot of signature or hype-driven releases go for, it lands in a range that feels accessible enough for fans who really want it. That matters. If Adidas had attached a huge premium and pushed it into a different bracket, maybe the conversation changes. But this drop sits in a zone where a motivated audience can absolutely show up. And when you combine that with the attention already surrounding the release, it becomes very easy to imagine this thing moving quickly, especially in the early wave. What also helps is that this shoe comes with a built-in emotional target. Supporters do not just want the shoe because of how it looks. Some of them want the shoe because they know how mad it makes the people who cannot stand Sophie Cunningham. That may sound petty, but that is real. Sports fans buy with emotion all the time. They buy to support. They buy to celebrate. They buy to signal loyalty. They buy to feel connected to a moment. And yes, sometimes they buy just to prove a point. If enough people see this release as a chance to back Sophie Cunningham while critics are loudly rooting against her, that can create its own wave of momentum. That is why all the mockery may end up becoming free promotion. Every sarcastic post helps spread the images. Every complaint puts the release date in front of more eyes. Every angry reaction reminds people the drop is coming. In a weird way, the critics are doing part of the marketing job for Adidas whether they mean to or not. That is the internet in 2026.
Attention is attention.
Outrage is distribution. And once something gets circulating with enough emotional voltage behind it, it becomes bigger than the original audience that was supposed to care. And from Sophie Cunningham's point of view, this whole situation almost fits her public image perfectly. She has never really come across like someone trying to win over every last critic. If anything, her whole appeal is that she seems comfortable with tension. Comfortable with being misunderstood. Comfortable being loud, fiery, and confrontational if that is what the moment demands. That kind of athlete does not shrink because some people are upset. That kind of athlete often gets stronger the more people tell her she should not be where she is. So when people act like Backlash is supposed to somehow embarrass her or derail the release, they may be misunderstanding the exact personality at the center of all this. If anything, this controversy makes the launch feel even more on-brand. Of course Sophie Cunningham's shoe drop would come with noise.
Of course it would split people.
Of course some fans would love it while others act personally offended by it. That contrast is part of what makes the whole release feel alive. It feels attached to a real player with a real identity, not a generic campaign made in a conference room. And in a crowded sports market, that authenticity matters. Even when it is messy. Sometimes especially when it is messy. And the bigger picture here is impossible to ignore. This is about more than one shoe. It is about the kind of athlete brands are willing to invest in now. It is about how women's sports are changing in real time. It is about how attention works in a media world driven by clips, fan armies, storylines, personality, and non-stop discourse. The old model, where everybody quietly agreed merit would be rewarded in one neat linear way, is gone. The current model is louder, faster, messier, and way more emotional. Sophie Cunningham is thriving in that environment, and this Adidas release is proof that major brands see that too. So no, the comments section is not the final judge here. The people declaring the release a failure before it happens are not the final judge either. The market will decide. The buyers will decide. The fans who actually open their wallets will decide. And judging by the amount of attention this shoe already has, Sophie Cunningham may be walking into a launch that proves a lot of people wrong in a very public way. And that might be the part driving the most frustration of all. Because if the shoe sells, then the people who spent days yelling that Sophie Cunningham should not have gotten this opportunity are going to be forced to watch the exact thing they feared happen. They are going to have to watch a player they tried to minimize become even more commercially validated. They are going to have to watch a brand double down on a decision they mocked. They are going to have to watch proof that cultural relevance is not something you can vote out of existence just because it annoys you. That is the real story here. Not just that Adidas gave Sophie Cunningham a shoe. It is that the reaction to it revealed exactly how much space she is already taking up in people's minds. People do not melt down over athletes who do not matter. They do not spend this much energy arguing over people they truly see as irrelevant. The scale of the backlash says more about Sophie Cunningham's current power than any stat line ever could. She has become impossible to ignore.
Adidas saw it. The fans saw it.
The critics definitely saw it. And now the only thing left is to see whether the sales match the noise. So now it is your turn. What do you think about Adidas teaming up with Sophie Cunningham for this shoe drop? Was this a smart business move by Adidas, or do you think the critics actually have a point? And be real, are people mad because of basketball, or are they mad because Sophie Cunningham keeps getting bigger no matter how hard they try to downplay her? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this debate is not slowing down anytime soon. And if you already know this shoe is going to sell out, I want to hear that too. If you are rocking with Sophie Cunningham, type her name loud in the comments. If you think this whole backlash is overblown, say that too. Let's see who really understands how sports, branding, and attention work in today's game. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next time we break down the biggest stories in women's sports and the internet chaos around them. Because if this reaction proved anything, it is that Sophie Cunningham is not getting ignored anymore, and this story is only getting started.